Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new edition of the Word of the Day podcast, where useful words are pleasantly explained. My name is Jamie Silva, I am your host, and I'm just thrilled that you decided to download this here episode. With no further ado, though that was really no ado at all, let's get to today's word, which is the adjective facile. Like several words we've featured recently, facile is also a French word, meaning easy. And this is one of its meanings in English as well, but I don't really hear it very often, and it's not the sense that we'll focus on today. The meaning I hear is more specific, referring to things that are sort of too easy. Specifically, ideas, theories, arguments, and especially plans and proposed solutions. Solutions that are suspiciously simple, basic, or gloss over serious flaws and obstacles. So for example, just the other day, producer Pete says to me, he says, "Hey, Jamie, if we want to double our listenership this year, how about we just tell our listeners to share the show with their friends? Easy peasy." And I didn't say this to him because I didn't want to hurt his feelings, but if it were that easy, then it would have happened already, right? Because we've been gently recommending that very thing to our listeners basically ever since we started the show. Hence, it's a rather facile proposal. Turning our attention to the Google definition, that goes, quote, especially of a theory or argument, appearing neat and comprehensive only by ignoring the true complexities of an issue, superficial, unquote. I like this very much, except that I think it should say, especially of theories, arguments, or proposed solutions, because facile is relevant in problem-solving situations all the time. Anyway, Merriam-Webster adds, quote, shallow or simplistic, which is also good. The etymology of facile is pretty interesting, so let's take a look. Facile traces back to the Latin verb facere, spelled F-A-C-E-R-E. This is actually one of the few Latin words that I still remember from back in high school because it had so many meanings and was so versatile that you just saw it everywhere, in Latin that is. Facere could mean to do or make, to become or to accomplish, and the Latin and later Middle French adjective facilis meant easy, which makes sense, right? You might think of a task that's easily accomplished or easily done. We say something kind of similar in English today, actually. The phrase, consider it done, which basically means, no problem, I got it, it's easy, I'll take care of it. This also reminds me of the English noun facility, one definition of which goes, quote, an ability to do or learn something well or easily, a natural aptitude, unquote. So if you say that someone has a facility for instruments, that means they pick them up easily, they learn how to play them quickly, they have a knack for them. This makes facility a great companion word to affinity, which means, quote, a spontaneous or natural liking or sympathy for someone or something, unquote. So if you have an affinity for something, that means you like it, you enjoy it. And if you have a facility for it, that means you're good at it. Hence the motto of the Word of the Day Career Counseling Office, affinity plus facility equals success. True story. Anyway, so one more thought on the Latin. Facere is also where we get the word difficult, which is obviously the opposite of easy/facile. The di, the de at the beginning, is called a negative prefix, a little word fragment that you put before another word in order to turn that word into its opposite. So examples include un, non, di, etc. Other examples involving the dis negative prefix are satisfied/dissatisfied, similar and dissimilar, order and disorder. In the case of difficult, I imagine the S part of dis must have faded away over time, maybe because difficult is really difficult to say. Okay, now back to the main thread. If something is facile, that doesn't mean that it's clearly stupid or counterproductive. Rather, it's naive. It treats complex and significant challenges as if they're straightforward and easily resolved. It reminds me a bit of the word sophomoric, which we covered back in episode 43. As a refresher, Merriam-Webster defined this as, quote, conceited and overconfident of knowledge, but poorly informed and immature, unquote. While this definition is phrased as if it refers to people, more often it refers to ideas. Quoting that episode briefly, sophomoric statements aren't necessarily wrong per se. In many cases they will be, but that's not the point. The point is that they reflect shallow, unsophisticated thinking, and perhaps overconfident thinking as well. Hence, sophomoric can describe observations that may be totally correct, but they're also pretty clearly just the first thing any man on the street would think of, and therefore they're not insightful at all, unquote. Now, you can easily imagine that the sort of person who makes a lot of sophomoric observations probably also offers a lot of facile solutions to complex problems, because those are the sort of fixes that underinformed people who haven't thought much about the subject would propose. As the old quip from renowned American journalist H.L. Mencken goes, "For every complex problem, there is an answer that is clear, simple, and wrong." Note, though, that you don't have to be an expert on a topic or have all the answers yourself in order to call something facile. You could just have the common sense gut reaction that it's got to be more complicated than that. There's got to be more to it. You may not be right, of course. Just like how sophomoric ideas can be sensible, so too might facile theories be correct, and facile solutions could maybe work. Sometimes in life, it really is that simple. And there's actually a whole philosophical/scientific concept built around the notion that lots of things are that simple. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Occam's razor. In layman's terms, this is the idea that the simplest explanation is most likely to be the right one. One way to use this reasoning technique is to avoid leaping to frightening conclusions based on limited subjective information. So, for example, if you hear your smoke alarm going off, the simplest, most likely explanation, the one that Occam's razor favors, is that it's low on batteries and is warning you to replace them, not that a large fire has begun to engulf your apartment complex. Or if you're texting back and forth with someone and they suddenly stop replying, Occam's razor suggests that they probably did not fall down an uncovered manhole, nor did they suddenly decide that they just don't want to be friends with you anymore. Instead, they probably just got distracted or started driving, something simple and benign like that. So how does facile come in? Well, with respect to Occam's razor, you could think of facile as referring to those less common times when the simplest explanation is actually wrong. And there's probably something else, something more complicated and maybe more sinister going on here. Okay, next I want to talk about a few scenarios from real life and fiction where this word facile would be very useful, very relevant. First up, in the financial realm, which, as you may recall, used to be my industry, many people out there claim to have discovered the one secret trick or method to making a fortune in the stock market fast, and they'll offer to tell you all about it if you sign up for their newsletter or seminar or whatever. Now, I myself don't know how to make a quick fortune in the stock market, or anywhere else for that matter. But if I see someone claiming that it's easy and that only they know how it's done, that's pretty suspicious, right? I mean, if their strategy worked so well, they could just use it themselves and become fabulously wealthy, rather than selling their secret method to the masses for $15 a pop or whatever. And more to the point, if it were that easy to quickly quadruple your investments, then the secret would get out and everyone would do it. And I guess everyone would be rich, which is clearly not the case. Hence, you could say that get-rich-quick schemes are facile. They treat something very difficult as if it's simple and easy. Speaking of the intersection between finance and facile, one of my favorite Saturday Night Live sketches aired during the Great Financial Crisis of 2008, when everyone out there was asking, what is happening to the economy? Whose fault is it? And how can we fix it? In the following clip, the host asks this very question to a satirical financial consultant.
Well, so what do we do?
Well, it's actually very simple. Somebody needs to get on top of the situation and fix it. Tomorrow morning when I have my bowl of whole grain Cheerios, the morning paper better read, "It's been fixed."
So what exactly should be done?
Well, it's not rocket science, Seth. It's a simple 3-step process. Step 1, fix. Step 2, it. Step 3, fix it. Then repeat steps 1 through 3 until it's all fixed.
How do we begin to fix
By
it?
fixing it.
Who's gonna fix it?
They are. They gonna fix it because they broke it. Fix it, fix it, fix it! Today!
Okay, as you probably picked up there, the suggestion to just fix it is very facile. Next, Lord of the Rings fans, and people under 40 who use the internet, are likely familiar with the "one does not simply" meme. This depicts the character of Boromir, starting to explain why the proposed plan to destroy the One Ring forever by melting it in the fires of Mordor cannot and will not work. The line appears in the following scene. Let's listen.
It must be taken deep into Mordor and cast back into the fiery chasm from whence it came. One of you must do this.
One does not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep. And the great eye is ever watchful. It is a barren wasteland, riddled with fire and ash and dust. The very air you breathe is a poisonous fume. Not with 10,000 men could you do this. It is folly.
Right, so Boromir is saying that the plan is too simplistic. It's not thought through, and it ignores obvious and substantial difficulties. He's saying that the plan is facile. So, anytime you say that one does not simply do such and such, you could say that a proposal to do that thing is facile. Examples might include getting in shape by buying an elliptical machine, becoming an influencer by starting a lifestyle and commentary YouTube channel, or fixing your broken toaster by shaking it vigorously and bumping it against the wall a few times. Again, these aren't guaranteed to fail, and maybe they're even good starting points. In fact, I've had some surprising success with the bang it on things/kick it approach to appliance repair. But, come on, these aren't exactly foolproof plans either. Now, in my opinion, Facile is exceptionally useful in professional settings, where people propose things all the time, and many of those proposals are really not up to snuff. And of course, in the workplace, you want to be direct but polite at the same time, while nudging people towards developing their ideas and thinking through problems in greater depth. Facile is the perfect word for these situations. For example, you might say, Jim, thanks so much for suggesting that we leverage quote-unquote big data solutions to dominate our chosen markets. But this is a bit facile, don't you think? Like, what solutions? What data? How would this work exactly? So, Jim, if you could go ahead and flesh this out some more and maybe update us again next week, that would be great. Kind of like that. Again, super useful. Though I don't want to make it sound as if only rank-and-file employees offer up facile ideas. It's actually equally, if not more common, for executive types to promulgate, that's episode 39, grand, sweeping, thoroughly facile visions of corporate success, backed up by facile theories of worker productivity, like work smarter, not harder. Okay, the last setting I want to touch on where facile comes in handy is crime shows and detective novels. In addition to the main character, be they a genius detective, hard-nosed private eye, con man turned FBI agent, or ordinary citizen with a perfect memory and keen observational skills, these stories also tend to feature not-so-genius sidekicks, or other lesser law enforcement personnel, who unhelpfully spout shallow, simplistic explanations for whatever they're investigating. Looks like Lord Barrington had a heart attack while taking out the trash, they'll say breezily, closing their little notebooks and putting them away. He was getting on in years. Well, case closed. But then our genius detective hero will poke holes in this facile theory and say, but why was Lord Barrington taking out the trash himself? He was a reclusive billionaire who kept a full household staff. Also, what about these other footprints next to his on the gravel? Someone get me the butler's shoes immediately. I suspect foul play. And of course, other times, the official police people try to pin the blame on an obvious suspect, like someone seen fleeing from the scene of the crime, or someone named in the victim's recently updated will. It's gotta be them, right? But here, too, the perspicacious crime-fighting protagonist will find this conclusion too tidy, too neat, too obvious to be correct. And actually, it's probably just what the true perpetrator wanted us to think. You see, folks, our hero will not be hoodwinked by facile resolutions to criminal cases. They will definitely take a whole episode, or maybe even a whole season, to unravel. Okay, it's now time to get some more examples of how to use facile in ordinary conversation or writing. Example number 1. When Frida asked her father to check for monsters under her bed, he recommended that she check for them herself by shining a flashlight underneath. This, Frida thought, was a very facile suggestion, since everyone knows monsters switch instantaneously between the closet and under the bed in order to escape detection. Example number 2. What do you mean I should go to bed earlier if I want to be less tired? Objected Ned to his doctor. That's so facile. It's got to be something else, like with my diet or my job, or maybe my melatonin receptors are out of whack. Something. Aren't there some maybe blood tests we could run to get to the bottom of this? And in case you couldn't tell, this is an example of where the simple, facile explanation actually could very well be correct. Moving along, example number 3 comes from the book Middlemarch by George Eliot, slightly edited for clarity. The speaker here is an aspiring author who's responding, rather harshly it seems to me, to his wife's suggestion that he start turning all of his notes he's compiled into an actual book. Quote, "My love," he said, with irritation reined in by propriety, "you may rely upon me for knowing the times and the seasons adapted to the different stages of a work, which is not to be measured by the facile conjectures of ignorant onlookers. It is ever the trial of the scrupulous explorer to be saluted with the impatient scorn of chatterers, who attempt only the smallest achievements, being indeed equipped for no other." Unquote. Okay, this is some very fancy language, but basically the irate husband is saying, "Look, dear, I'll get around to writing that book in my own sweet time, so don't rush me. You clearly don't understand the creative process, and telling me to start writing is a facile, ignorant suggestion." Like I said, pretty harsh. Finally, example number 4 comes from an article entitled Confessions of a Fake Scientist, What I Learned About Real Science by Making Fun of It, by Phil Edwards, published in Slate magazine in August 2012, and edited for brevity. Quote, "When I began my career as a fake scientist, I'd imagined science as the final word in an argument. But for real scientists, science isn't a cudgel. It's the beginning of a conversation. I still believe that, at its worst and most facile, science can take on an unearned sense of authority. My skepticism isn't contrary to science, however. It's baked in the cake, or, if you prefer, mixed in the beaker. Most real scientists provide the opposite of the definitive answers I'd imagined. They seek a series of discrete questions, test them, and mold the results into a theory." Unquote. Okay, folks, that'll do it for the examples, but that will not do it for today's show. Not yet. First up we have, and brace yourselves, more gratuitous poetry, because the Ode to Gruyere that we read in our recent episode on Muse was apparently not enough. But also, this poem, which I wrote a couple years ago while pondering a potential job switch, does tie together a couple different words we've highlighted recently. In addition to being inspired by my muse, of course, it's all about workplace perks, or perquisites, which we covered in episode 111. And also, the speaker is demanding an easy, aka facile in the less used sense, job. The poem is entitled Job Qualifications, or An Honest Cover Letter. And the job qualifications in question, FYI, are the qualifications that a job would have to have in order to interest the speaker. How clever. Quote, "I want a job that is easy and fun, with a sense of fulfillment when the workday is done, where the meetings are short and vacations are long, and top-quality swag can be had for a song, where we pop in quite late and leave rather early, and the bosses are never oppressive or surly, where the deadlines are soft, so there's oft time to kill, where the founders are cool and the vibe's pretty chill, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and working through lunch strikes us all as absurd. Compensation, of course, should be suitably generous, lest I be left in the poorhouse or penniless. May the dress code be casual, no starched shirts required, so I'd never show up uncomfortably attired. I'd be on a team of friendly coworkers, not a bunch of connivers or shirkers. There'd be company outings for ladies and gents, in parks and on boats and at sporting events. Just one other thing I neglected to ask. Would I have the right to decline any task? It just might not suit me, you see, or be such that I couldn't enjoy it quite nearly as much as I ought to for it to be worth my time, which I want to use wisely. Is that such a crime? Yes, I want a job that is easy and fun. Contact me below if yours might be the one. And that's it. I've posted the full poem to the Word of the Day Medium page, which we'll put a link to in the show notes as well, so feel free to steal it and submit it as a cover letter to prospective employers. They'll admire your chutzpah, if nothing else. Well, folks, that's our episode. We very much hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, we hope you'll make Producer Pete's facile proposal look pretty genius by telling your friends about the show. Until next time, then, this is Jamie Silva, your host, bidding you a fond farewell from the RAV4 studios, and as always, we hope you have a great